You think Cuba has more civil rights than the United States? Why are people getting on floating rafts and risking their lives to get here if those countries are so well run?
Because Donald Trump has the Navy blockading the island of Cuba from even obtaining oil.
That doesn't even logically make sense.
Well, slowly but surely, it looks as if the recent DSA win streak is being turned into something of a losing streak, because we just analyzed the Florida elections tonight from maybe a big picture perspective, but let's now zoom into the Democrat primary and look at specifically how the DSA candidates actually did, because to make a long story short, not all that well. And this is really a double-edged sword, because on one hand, I suppose it is a healthy thing for the country if these candidates lose, even on their own side. Hey, it shows that these types of politics are being rejected. They're not viable. On the other hand, though, if, as we've established many times, there's not that much of a difference between the Democrat establishment and the DSA, then why not seek the candidates who are easier to beat, right? So every time an establishment Democrat beats one of these people, I kind of laugh at the commies, and then I look there and say, oh, well, kind of wish that person would have won, if you know what I'm saying by that. But here's the thing, we might actually still be in luck. And this kind of shows more proof, actually, that time is ticking for the Democrat establishment, because of all of the candidates that lost tonight, there's actually one far leftist who ended up winning. And they're arguably the most important candidate of them all, that being the nominee for Senate. This is a person, while obviously they have no chance either way in the state of Florida, especially in a statewide race. We just covered how Republican turnout alone tonight seems to indicate Florida is not going to be up for grabs remotely in November. Still, you don't want that person at the top of the ticket basically defining what Democrats are in this state. Hey, in a place heavily controlled by, say, South Florida and Cuban voters, yes, let's associate our political party with communism. Seems like a very smart idea. So we'll break down both sides of that here tonight. But all right, a breakdown. How'd the DSA do? Let's talk about it. First, though, guys, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, let's start here in one of the congressional primaries currently held by Democrat incumbent Jared Moskowitz. Now, keep in mind, due to redistricting, let's remember we redrew the maps here. This is going to basically be more or less a competitive district now, a sort of toss-up district. And in that, Jared Moskowitz was running against this DSA commie by the name of Oliver Larkin. And of course, in his infinite wisdom, you know, we just are seeing how smart these people are, how great they are at politics, how viable their brand is. Apparently not realizing, hey, maybe normal Americans, normal Floridians in particular might disagree with this, said, and I kid you not, in defense of Cuba, in Florida, you're going to run on the campaign of defending Cuba. Oh, no wonder he lost. And that's why you almost wish, hey, I wish this brain-dead idiot was maybe 10% smarter, or else he might have actually won this primary. But here he was saying that Cuba actually has more civil rights than America, which I'm sure will go over perfectly with a Floridian electorate, and therefore calls to open America's borders. Yeah, great thing to be running in. Oh, what is that right there? You see that, guys? North Miami. Very smart. You're obviously very concerned with giving people as many benefits as possible, but you also want to abolish ICE. We're $40 trillion in debt. Presumably, a lot of the free tuition would potentially, under your plan, go to illegal immigrants. We know roughly there are at least 20 million people illegally in this country. Should there be borders? What would be too much illegal immigration for you? 50 million? 100 million? You talked about Cuba. You talked about Nicaragua, Venezuela. Should we take all of Latin America inside of our borders? Where would you draw the line when it comes to who we should welcome in this country?
I would draw the line at stopping these crushing sanctions regimes that Donald Trump has leveled on countries like Venezuela in his first term.
And sanctions and everything else, but just pure numbers. What is a number where you, Oliver, in South Florida would say, you know what? We've got too many people who aren't citizens of the United States.
I don't expect we're going to see much more immigration from Mexico when Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum is raising the minimum wage and increasing home ownership.
But you think Mexico is better than America?
Than we are here.
You think life in Mexico is so good that Mexicans are going to stop coming here?
What I'm saying is that there are governments outside of the United States that are investing in their people.
Wait, then why are they coming here,
borders
Oliver?
Yeah, so you just heard from this character. Would it exactly surprise anyone to find out that the guy lost by over 30 points tonight? What an idiot. The political instincts of a goldfish. And sources on the ground are alleging the goldfish actually has better political instincts. In fact, a goldfish likely would have run a more viable campaign with better political messaging than this guy did in North Miami, Florida, which I repeat is kind of unfortunate. Because had this guy been a little bit smarter, had he maybe waited till the general election to spew this garbage, maybe we would have been able to run against him. But now we got to run against the mainline, quote unquote, Democrat who in himself probably deep down doesn't really disagree here with Oliver Larkin. The sort of real difference is strategy between, as we've explained, the Democrat establishment and the DSA. The Democrat establishment is just a little bit smarter at messaging, and they've sort of said this stuff out loud. So do keep that in mind. But still, right, that's how it goes, because the DSA are idiots, because people like Francesca Hong thought that saying cancel Thanksgiving because it's painful for our communities wouldn't backfire on her in Wisconsin, because I don't know, it's as if these people stay in their little hipster clubs, or they don't go outside or something, and they don't just realize the actual opinions of normal Americans in this country, especially normal Floridians, South Floridians at that. Are you brain dead? What are you doing here? But that's, of course, what went down. And while I'm a little disappointed about it, not exactly all that surprised. By the way, who are the 30% who did vote for this loser, right? Would like to know that. But hey, what can we say? Communists do exist in every part of this country. But regardless, so that was that election. And then over in Broward County, we now have the race involving the infamous Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who you probably heard of. But basically what happened here is they merged multiple different Fort Lauderdale area districts into one under the new GOP map. And for example, former Democrat Congresswoman Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. Anyone remember that name? This is basically the girl who got indicted for stealing $5 million in FEMA funds. Remember that? We covered that story last year. Okay. And you're like, why is she still in politics? What is she doing here? Well, apparently she tried to go here and make a run, while of course claiming if, she loses, insinuating that it's going to be racist and, all that type of different normal Democrat rhetoric, right? Typical, like this is what we call a literal race hustler, right? That term gets thrown out a lot. Please understand this is what it means. You're running as this woke, black, leftist congresswoman, all this stuff, BLM, DEI, et cetera, et cetera. In reality, you're just like a fraudster. I mean, that's how it always goes. But, long story short, unfortunately, she likewise got clobbered, only got about 9% of the vote. Specifically, the communist candidate in the race, Elijah Manley, running on that very same platform, also entered. But much like you saw in other results from South Florida, he had a lot of hype around him. In the end, got absolutely clobbered, only getting about 14% of the vote. And unfortunately, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is advancing here, but kind of funny to see how, on both sides, actually, both on the left and the quote unquote right. I don't know if I'd call it the right, but it's sort of the same James Fishback phenomenon we witnessed tonight. When you take these very terminally online ideas into the real world, that's the reality check that comes, right? You kind of realize, what's the country actually like? What do people actually think? Outside of prediction markets, polls that are probably being manipulated at this point. I mean, there's actually been exposed several different times in 2026. If you wonder why polling has suddenly gone off the deep end, arguably that's a major contributing factor there, right? The elections tell the story. And there you have it. What do you know, especially in Florida, the state with secure elections, by the way. Oh, even on the Democrat side, even from the libtards who do exist, because we do remember this is Florida. 10 years ago, it was a legitimate swing state, so that stuff is still around. But even among them, it's almost as if, oh, wait a minute. A lot of the popularity of this type of politics has been completely not just imported from the third world, but even in our elections themselves. Kind of astroturfed, actually, right? When you think about it. So there you have that. But anyways, that's the DSA defeat. Let's talk about their one victory, though. Because we do have this lady right here who was running for the Senate nomination against Colonel Vindman. Anyone remember Vindman? That, guy from the impeachment trial. He was a big left-wing hero for many years throughout the 2010s. Interestingly, as we've said many times, woke is getting replaced by third world. You could argue this is another example of it. Who you might think should be a surefire sort of Democrat nominee, right? He's your typical MSNBC libtard guy. By the way, this is Florida, so it's a very, it's a state with a lot of retirees. Democrat boomers tend to watch the MS Now and all that, so you would think this is their person, right? Impeachment Republican, no kings, all of that stuff. Well, take a look at who the character is tonight that apparently has just secured the nomination for Senate in Florida.
Now it's time for us to not just be quiet, because silence is complicity.
She's a whole different kind of cray-cray. In the spring, Ange was arrested for staging a sit-in outside DeSantis' office. The day before, she stormed the Capitol in Tallahassee, hot pink and a bullhorn.
The question now recurs on final passage of HB 1D. The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will proceed to vote.
If Angie's in charge, Florida man can do whatever he wants, because Angie wants to abolish prisons.
I want to abolish for-profit prisons because I believe right now people aren't educating our children and they're ushering them into the school-to-prison pipeline because they want to exploit labor.
But she'll make one exception. Quote, I can't wait until Donald Trump is arrested and held accountable. So prisons are racist unless you're throwing the white man in them. That's what she's running on. Get whitey. And if you cried when Charlie died, Klansman. Quote, it is beyond disrespectful to introduce resolutions honoring Charlie Kirk. If you support it, you are a tool of white supremacy, and I did not stutter.
Yeah, so you get the idea. Basically a completely ghetto, loud, insane, crazy communist race hustler. And somehow she won the nomination for Senate against a former libtard celebrity. Somehow the pro-Cuba guy down in North Miami doesn't win, but she does statewide, to which, I really have to wonder how much of that has to do with her actual ideology in itself. Does it have to do with people wanting to abolish prison? Or honestly, my theory on this, it's the fact that she's not white and she was running against the white guy. And so, understanding how certain voting demographics behave in the Democrat Party, if I were being honest, that likely carried her across the finish line. And maybe that's the difference between this one and the other one, right? It's just that. It's that simple, and she makes a lot of noise. And so I'm sure among the hardcore liberals, she's just this big, giant hero. But, spoiler alert, let me just say it right now. This is a gift to us because we should be just fine either way in November. Again, don't get complacent. You got to vote. But so long as we match today's turnout compared to the Democrats, we're going to destroy them. So that's just fine. But anyways, here's the other thing, though, because we're going to beat her and she's going to be easier to beat. But also do keep in mind, this is very emblematic of the Democrat establishment not actually being able to stop the communists where it counts. Because think about this for a moment. She is going to be one of the two major candidates in the Florida election itself, right? Governor and senator. That's what we have going on this year. So when you think about that, the whole state is going to be talking about this individual in particular. She's going to become one of the two, if not the number one, major face of the Democrat Party in Florida. And you think down ballot, by the way, for what that means for, let's say, Republican turnout in lower level races, and especially those congressional races, versus think about how many Democrats might look at this person, Democrat voters, and maybe just not be that enthused, sit at home, refuse to get behind this person. 100% who's leading the top of your ticket absolutely does impact, what happens below it. We call that down ballot coattails. And one can only assume the down ballot coattails of this insane abolish the prisons lady is not going to translate all that well. Okay. And this is already given the fact that when we look to many of those exact congressional districts, right, the new ones, those 4 new ones that we're going to need to win, many of them, by the way, are guess where? In these very areas, South Florida, Broward County, places like that, right? Broward County, if you don't know, by the way, is one of the biggest Democrat strongholds in all of Florida. That's basically where Fort Lauderdale and some of the surrounding cities are. And so it's one of the last blue areas left in the state. Well, as you can see tonight, according to Michael Worley here, Democrat-dominated Broward County, Florida was projected to have the lowest primary turnout in over a decade. Isn't that interesting, by the way? What exactly does that mean? Especially with all the new congressional districts, when you might think, hey, this is the most important. Democrats want to try to hold on to this. They want to make it effectively a Florida Republican dummy mander at the end of the day. Not only do you have people at the top of the ticket who are complete lunatics and are undeniably going to hurt your party, and probably those coattails are going to be negative ones, but also on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, in your strongholds, and by the way, in the places where you need to win, because we just talked about turnout and energy in the last video, whatever happened today, turnout among Florida Democrats is actually down. You'd have to assume a lot of them probably upped and moved. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. But also to an extent, I mean, even being here in this state, I'll personally attest to this fact. The liberals here in our state are almost a little bit tamer, I would say, than conservatives in the sense, and you can tell this is the reason why. It's not because they're deep down more sane. It's because they've been completely broken. They've been demoralized, right? You kind of almost are thrown in the towel at this point. And if that continues to be what they do in November, then again, don't get complacent, especially if you live in South Florida, because we need these districts, obviously. But yeah, it's not looking very good for them, right? And again, the Democrat establishment might sit there and say, okay, we stopped the DSA, guys. Don't worry. You know, we'll be fine in November. And then the one that breaks through the cracks, how fitting is that, is the one who's going to be talked about by the whole state, literally everywhere. Okay, yeah. Great way, by the way, not just to maybe turn off Democrats and independents, great way to turn out Republican voters. Because this is Florida, obviously. Republican voters way outnumber Democrats now at this point. It's just a question of, are Republican voters for whatever reason going to stay home? If you had any skepticism, if you had any reason to do that, I'd have to assume this lady, being one of the two top statewide candidates, might make you have to reconsider that. And let me just say right now, I do believe that is going to happen. So there you go, Democrats. Great job. You're doing such a fantastic job of holding back the communist insurrection, right? Don't worry, guys. Everything's under control. We're fine here. They're not the future of the party. Look, Debbie Wasserman Schultz just won. Jared Moskowitz just won. Oh, oopsie, the most important candidate just lost. Okay, there you go. You know, in the end, also kind of a fitting story of what happened to a lot of Democrat heroes and champions of the 2010s, sort of No Kings 1. It looks like No Kings 2 has now replaced you, and it's not saner, it's crazier. But what else can we say? Anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.